For the ones who work hard to ensure their crew can always go the extra mile, and the ones who get in early so everyone can go home on time, there's Grainger, offering professional-grade supplies backed by product experts so you can quickly and easily find what you need. Plus, you can count on access to a committed team ready to go the extra mile for you. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night.
Welcome to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast, where we talk about the continual pursuit of the section hiker.
And I'll spread the word, and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come. And we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
Welcome to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast. I'm your host, Julie Jester Gayhart, and this is the podcast where we talk about the continual pursuit of the section hiker and what it takes to complete a trail section by section. For me, it took 12 years to section hike the Appalachian Trail from June of 2006 until July of 2017. I'm an educator by day, but a hiker at heart. I'll hike north, south, backpack, slack pack, day hike, or even these days, glamp to get the job done. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. I am really excited to welcome to the podcast for the first time two guests that have shared a lot of time section hiking the Appalachian Trail together and plan to continue their quest north on the trail section hiking as much as possible. I think you will find that we all have a lot in common with Chris Berg and Chris Rondeau, aka Hurley and Space Bean, or as I called them in our initial chat, Chris 1 and Chris 2. As you'll hear in their interview, they have a lot of heart and a deep passion for the Appalachian Trail. So far, they have completed 300 trail miles from Springer Mountain to Irwin, Tennessee. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Julie, for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
And thanks for being on. So basically, you guys have worked together in law enforcement for over 17 years.
Yes, that's correct. 17 years we've been working together.
Perfect. What started your interest in the Appalachian Trail, and who persuaded who to start hiking?
Well, this would be Chris number 1, Hurley.
Perfect.
My brother gave me the book, A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson. So I read his book, and I became intrigued because I really never heard of the Appalachian Trail prior to that. So I was like, I got to have another book. I need to read more about this. So I got Kyle Roerig's book, Lost on the Appalachian Trail, and his book, and I've read so many books at this point in time, but it was absolutely phenomenal. He did an incredible job. He made me feel like I was there. And when I completed his book, I just sat there and I'm like, I got to do it. I got to walk this trail. And that's when my idea popped in my head that I want to hike the Appalachian Trail.
And is that when you decided that Chris number 2 was the one that was going to be going with you?
Well, I had introduced him into hiking, and we did the Ozark Trail down in Missouri together, and he fell in love his very first hike with that. And because of his schedule, his athleticism, I had immediately invited him to go with me.
You decided he was the one. So Chris R, leading into that, Chris B is talking all about the trail and telling you all this stuff and all the books he's read. So you stated to me that he was the thesaurus of the Appalachian Trail. What does that statement mean, and how did that influence you to start hiking?
I really did not know much about the Appalachian Trail either. When Chris presented this hike, he was like, let's do this 200-mile hike all at once. We'll do 2 weeks. It'll be 14 days. We're going to go over 3 states. And while he's explaining this to me, I'm looking at him like, dude, you're crazy. There's no way I can do 200 miles right off the bat. And So then he kind of explained the whole concept of the trail. He actually lent me one of the books that he had read, and he had planned our first hike, our first section hike, which was going to be Springer to Dix Creek. We kind of settled on that mileage, and I just got kind of, I guess I really didn't understand the scope or the grandiose part of it, the kind of the lore and the lure of the trail until we were on our ride down there that first night sleeping. I don't think either of us slept. We had a couple other people there with us too to do this hike, but it was pretty exciting. And then once I was on the trail, I just enjoyed the social aspect of it, being able to meet new people. And we did our first hike. It was near the end of March 2017, so it was during the thru hiker season. So we got to meet a lot of interesting people from the country, around the world, about what drew them into hiking. And I just really enjoyed that. It was much different experience than I had on other maybe less traveled trails that we'd hiked before.
Great. So along those lines, okay, so you've kind of set the scene. You guys have read some books. You've now deemed that Chris B is the thesaurus. You guys get down to Springer Mountain. You're getting ready to go out on the trail. Tell the listeners a little bit about that particular hike and what you try to accomplish with each section when you go out.
So that hike, like Chris said, is our first night we stayed at top of Georgia with Sir Pax-a-Lot with Bob, and we couldn't sleep. I felt like I was a little kid on Christmas Eve. I just could not wait to get on Springer. So we wake up the next morning. Our shuttle takes us to Springer Mountain, which that was an interesting trip in itself. And
that's
then,
a little bit of a ride from top of Georgia. I bet that was interesting.
It was about an hour and a half. And we were crammed in this little tiny car. And I think there was 4 of us total, or 5 of us, 4 of us. So we get in the parking lot, and I at Springer, and my goosebumps are just going crazy. And I just wanted to walk north, and I was so frustrated that we had to walk south to get to, because we didn't do Amicola, we didn't do the approach trail.
So was that the first time you realized you had to go back the mile to get to Springer Mountain?
No,
okay.
No, I knew it because I had gut hooks. So I heard somebody else said about gut hooks and the importance that it brings to the trail. It wasn't doing a whole trail, so I didn't get AWOL's book. But then when I got to Springer and I saw that plaque and I saw that first blaze, it was like church to me. Like, some people go to church, or they go to that fishing trip, or they do whatever. But when I was standing on top of Springer looking at that plaque and that first blaze, like, I just had an overwhelming emotional feeling come over me. Like, I am finally here. I cannot believe this. And it was like a little kid on Christmas Day at that point in time. And it was foggy. There was no view whatsoever. But to me, it didn't matter. It was like the biggest ray of sunshine I felt on me standing on top of Springer for the very first time after reading about it so many times and seeing it on YouTube. So when we left Springer, we did I think we did 9 or 10 miles, or 8.5, whatever it is, to Hawk Mountain Shelter. And, Chris is a very social person. He loves talking to people, and I am very antisocial. And that's why I like to hike and I like to be in the woods, because I don't like to talk to people. And every single person we come across, whether they come southbound or we pass them or at a water source or whatever, Chris is talking and talking and talking, whether it be about gear or whatever it may be. And I'm just like, dude, shut up. Stop talking. Let's go. So we got to Hawk Mountain, and it was like it was like a frat house. There was so many people.
Chris, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, you know what? Like, it's part of the fun of hiking the Appalachian Trail. Like, that's the draw, and that's, I've only read one book, but just talking about meeting people and how people create lifelong friends. Obviously, when they're doing a thru hike, we're only there for a week, but I still want to experience that. So I still want to, pick people's brains about why they're there. What's going on with their life. And it's just interesting because everyone comes from different backgrounds, but we all share this common interest and love for backpacking. And so, like, doing the whole, like, I like going when it's through hiker season because you get to meet these people. Granted, I also just like backpacking when it's just Chris and I or a couple other people. That's also fun too, and it's more of like an intimate gathering. But that was part of the experience to me, part of the whole allure. And I wanted to be completely immersed in that. I didn't want to just kind of avoid that part of it. And so that was not only the backpacking while walking through the day, it's also hanging out by the shelters to meet people, staying in hostels, things like that.
I think that's great. And we're going to get into a little more of that in just a bit. But right now, I want to move forward as you got that first section, you got that fire in your belly, you've seen the plaque, and you've realized there's something about those white blazes. And for those of us that are the lovers of Appalachian Trail, there's something about following those white blazes. And as you move forward, when you guys are moving into your additional section hikes, you guys went on to complete like Dix Creek, Georgia to the NOC in North Carolina, but for some reason you guys didn't do that hike together. So each of you, tell me a little bit about your experience not hiking together and with other people.
Okay, Chris too here. So basically the reason we hiked that section separately is our personal schedules with families and vacation time just did not align. So we were, I had been talking about my experience on the first hike from Springer to Dix Creek with some of my coworkers. And I had another coworker who expressed interest that she wanted to go backpacking. She had done a lot of like REI or like outfitter sponsored trips, but nothing where you do it all yourself.
Right. We call that glamping, some kind of glamping. Yeah.
She told me about her hike to Monte Picchu, but everyone else carried all the gear for her. I'm like, well, you're not really doing anything when you got all these guys carrying it for you. So we started planning our trip to do that next section from Dix Creek to NOC. And we went in late July of that year. So it was a little different climate, different. You see the trail a lot different. It was all green at that point, and there's a lot less people on the trail. But we still nonetheless had a great time. We enjoyed hiking around. The few views we got to see were fantastic and made the trip worthwhile. And we still, I think on that third day we hiked near Franklin, North Carolina, and we got to stay at a hostel there. And
nice. Which hostel did you guys stay at there?
That one we were at. What is it? The Gooder Grove Hostel.
Gooder Grove, yeah.
Gooder Grove Hostel, where we stayed. And we just went, there's a brewery down there, and my friend went to the big outfitter there.
Outdoor 76.
The Outdoor 76, yeah.
We just kind of experienced, again, we just did what we would have done had we been doing a through hike or been doing through hiker season. We just did it on our own little section hike. So we still got to experience it. It was still very fun.
Nice. And back to Chris number 1, right?
Yeah.
How did your experience go without Chris number 2?
Well, I mean, I've hiked with Chris in all over the country, and so it was weird going without him, and I felt like he cheated on me going with somebody else. So, and as much as we have two different styles of hiking, I mean, he's my number one hiking partner. If I had to choose, I wouldn't go with anybody else in this world before him. And the reason why is that he doesn't care about roughing it. He doesn't care about being dirty. He doesn't care about being uncomfortable. It doesn't make a difference. Now, some of the other guys I went with, they're a little bit more yuppity and a little bit more glampier, and they're not comfortable being uncomfortable like we are. So as much as I don't like people, I still like to experience the Appalachian Trail environment. That's why I planned our very first hike. As much as I don't like people, I still did it in March because I wanted to experience what it was like to be involved with all those through hikers, or be in part of a bubble maybe. So being with these guys, we had this, we hiked when we got to Franklin, and we didn't stay in a hostel. We stayed at a micro hotel there in Franklin, North Carolina. And we did too well, as well go to Outdoor 76, which was really cool. Cause again, you read about that place in books and stuff. So I wanted to experience all these things and see what I've actually read about. But that section was pretty amazing. It had some pretty cool views. Albert Mountain was pretty intense, doing that foot over hand.
Yeah, and that's a milestone too. That's the 100 miles. So that's a big deal to get there.
And then Waiawa, I always pronounce that wrong. Tower.
The Waiawa Tower.
Waiawa Tower is amazing. And then that fire tower after Waiawa was absolutely incredible. When you're going north, the views are just absolutely incredible. Probably one of the best I've seen on the AT. And then there's after that, going down to the NOC, there was pretty amazing little ridge walking, which is probably my second favorite spot on the Appalachian Trail so far that I've experienced, walking that ridge line, because it was a little sketchy, but it was like 360-degree views, and it just made you realize how small you actually were.
Yeah, that's a nice hike. And you mentioned that tower, and for some reason I cannot remember the name of that tower, but it is gorgeous up there. Absolutely gorgeous. So as of today, you guys have basically completed everything going north from Springer Mountain to Irwin, Tennessee, except the Smokies.
Correct.
So I think this is a good point in our conversation to bring up the fact that one of you likes tenting near the shelters and one of you does not. The reason I bring this up is that in the Smokies,
So you can figure that out.
yeah, you're pretty much required to stay in the shelters. So I don't know how this is all going to go down when you get to the Smokies. So Chris B., tell us your take on the shelters.
I have anxiety sharing a hotel room with somebody, even if it's somebody I know well. It's like knowing that somebody's sleeping next to me, I can't sleep. And if I can't sleep, I freak out. So, and also like, I don't know what it is about snoring. It literally makes me angry. I know I probably sound like a complete psychopath over this whole thing, but snoring, and it drives the anxiety through the roof. So
I need to
Okay.
interject here real quick. Chris snores sometimes, and he doesn't realize it. And he
Oh,
also talks in his sleep. So he's woken me up numerous times on the trail talking to
do
himself
you like
and
try to talk
snoring.
back to him
So he
and see if
paints
he'll
this
talk
picture,
back?
right? No, like a couple times it startled me. I heard him yelling once. I didn't know what was going on. So, but he doesn't like being around people who snore, but he himself contributes to this noise.
Those are the ones that are always the ones that are snoring, the ones that
Right.
sleep all night and they go, oh, I didn't sleep at all last night. Yeah, you did because you were snoring all night.
Well, we
Right.
sleep in hammocks, so sometimes the neck gets propped up a little bit that cuts off the airwave. But the shelter life, again, like, so of all the miles we've completed, I think we've slept at one shelter, and we didn't sleep in it. We slept next to it, and still, the anxiety just drives me crazy. Like, I love stealth camping. I'm all about stealth camping. So we're doing the Smoky section in May. We're going from the dam. I can't even think of it right now.
Montana Dam.
Montana Dam to Standing Bear is our next hike.
Hey, listen, I might want to go with you guys. This would be great video.
Oh, I'm
100%.
sure.
Because
You
I
can
need
come.
to see you guys at these shelters.
You're more than welcome.
You know
So
what? Yeah.
I got like I said, we usually camp. I got a bivy tent, and so I'm going to bring that. And regardless of what the shelter looks like, I'm putting up my tent. And if a ranger comes, a ranger comes. So we'll see what happens. But
And you'll probably see one, but Chris R., I'm just going to go ahead and assume your take on the shelters is totally the opposite.
Yeah, well, like I said, I want to be social. I want to see, experience, and talk with people. And Chris is a great hiking partner during the day because he will talk. But at night, it's like 7 o'clock, 7:30. He's in his hammock, and then I'm sitting there, the two of us, like bored out of my mind. I have no one to talk to. I'll try to listen to podcasts, or I'll do something. But I'm just bored. I'm like, dude, like
I'm lonely.
the whole day, like what's going on, So he is right. He and I have only ever camped near a shelter once, and again, like he was in his hammock by 7 o'clock, and me and the 4 or 5 other people, we kind of hung out and talked. The one hike I did without him with one of my other coworkers, we camped at a shelter every night, and except the night that we stayed in the hostel, we were always by a shelter, which was a really cool experience. We met, like a father and a daughter that were doing section hiking. We met Boy Scout troops. We met other groups. And I kind of like that little aspect because you see them, and even though you're only on the trail for a few days to a week, you kind of keep running into each other. You kind of leapfrog as you're going, and you talk how your day's going. So the Smokies don't really concern me about having to stay in a shelter. It will be a little different, like Chris mentioned, that we both do hammock camping. So
Yeah.
we're both going to be bringing, ultralight tents. He's going to bring a bivy and bringing an air mattress, but we don't normally carry that type of gear. So we're looking forward. It'll be a little bit different, new challenges, and we're going to schedule it we're trying to avoid the bubble of through hiker season for that trip because some of the stories that you hear, people coming off that section, they're like, man, it's a rough night.
It's not. Okay, it's not. It's different, but it's not that bad, especially since you guys are hammockers. I mean, that'll be easy. That won't, and there are places to put your tent up at the shelters. I mean, there's not a ton of stealth camping because a lot of it going through there, you're up on ridge lines, but you guys aren't going to have the issue. Not at all. Not at all. You'll be fine.
We're excited.
But please take a lot of video because I think that'll be hilarious.
And lots of Tylenol PM.
Exactly. So this question is going to be too easy for you guys. So most hikers, everybody knows the saying, hike your own hike. And I'm pretty sure and even the listeners would agree that I think the two of you have figured out how to hike your own hike with each other. Can each of you talk about your hiking styles? We know how you guys sleep at night now, but your hiking styles and how they work together.
I'm a little older than him and a little heavier, and he's a little more athletic. So Chris is very fast. He's tough to keep up with. And every time we plan these hikes, I'm like, dude, can we hike together? Yeah, I'll hike together. I'm not going to leave you behind. And we're there for 40 minutes, and he's like an inch, and then he's gone around the next bend, and then I don't see him to the next shelter or the next water source. So like the last section we just did was only 30 miles from, where did we go? Where was it? Where was our starting point?
We started at
Montana Dam to NOC. We went south for that one.
Yep.
So out of that 30 miles, we probably only hiked together 4 miles the entire time. So he's very fast, and I complain a lot when I hike, but people think I'm complaining, but it's just me like motivating myself, and it probably could be kind of annoying at times. But because I was like, all you do is complain. I'm like, no, man, this is self-talk. This is self.
Yeah. There's one thing that I've learned about both of you.
Styles.
Yeah, you guys are very self-aware. You have a keen sense of self-awareness. I think it's great. Okay, keep going.
Well, we'll leapfrog because we get up in the morning. I usually leave first, and because I know he's going to pass me, and then he'll catch up in the morning. We'll hike together for a mile or two, and then he's gone. And then I'll catch up to him around lunch, and then we'll hang out for a bit. He's been resting for 45 minutes, which means I get a 10-minute rest because he's ready to go.
Doesn't that make you mad? I hate that.
Does.
When somebody gets, when you get to the top and they've been up there hanging out and chilling, and you get up there and you're dying, they're like, you ready?
Yeah, you ready to go? I'm like, dude, I just sat down.
Yeah.
And then, so we'll hike together for another mile or two, and then he's gone. And then I'll see him at the next water source, and then we'll figure out, all right, where's the next stealth spot? Because I'm not doing a shelter. And then I usually meet him at the stealth spot. It's kind of how it goes with us.
All right. So Chris R., apparently you've been deemed the speed demon. So what's your take on this?
You know what? Once I get in the zone and I'm moving, I just don't want to stop unless I'm tired or I need to rest. And I take more breaks as like a week goes on, as a trip goes on, just because I'm probably just more fatigued and sore. But part of what makes me want to hike is having that. I like the physical and the mental challenge of it. So the physical part is when I start a climb, I'm one that as your muscles start burning, I just push through it. I don't want to take a break and just make it take longer. I'd rather get to the top and then break. And that's just how I am. So I just kind of I like to move quick and then get to where I'm going, and then they can take longer breaks than when I do stop for lunch or I do stop here. And it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of how I am. And there are a couple times where Chris, he takes off. Every once in a while, he kicks it into this other gear that you rarely see from him, and he'll just take off. And then I'll be one playing catch up, which is fine. But yeah, that's our hiking style. He's more steady and at a slower pace, and I'm just more like these spurts of quickness.
But it works. I mean,
yeah.
And as I think Chris B stated earlier, you're the only one he really wants to go hiking with. So you guys have figured out that pattern. I mean, like I said, you're very self-aware. You're very open with what you like and what you don't like. And that's what makes a perfect match, because when people are out there doing stuff they don't want to do, that's when it doesn't work. Each of you have different hiking styles. Each of you have different ways in how you want to interact with the hikers. And you have different reasons for hiking the trail and what you actually think about while you're on the trail. So Chris B., you stated in our initial talk that hiking was a calling for you. Please explain what that means.
I would say the Appalachian Trail is more of a calling. Like, I love to hike, and there's not a lot of places because we live in a Chicagoland area, and we have to drive at least 4 miles in any direction to go anywhere that's remotely fun for hiking. But the trail, the Appalachian Trail, to me is a calling. Like, when I'm at work and I'm sitting in my squad car, whatever, that's what I'm thinking about. Every day for breakfast, I go get my coffee. I sit down, I watch videos on the Appalachian Trail, or I'm reading a book on the Appalachian Trail. I'm thinking about the Appalachian Trail. I have pictures of blazes, white blazes hanging up in my house. So to me, the trail is a calling. To me, that is my church. And when I'm on that trail, like I'm at peace. And that is like the most purest place that I can be, where I can actually think about things and I can process things, like how I'm going to be a better father, how I want to be a better husband, how I want to be a better person. And I'm not a religious person whatsoever. I do believe in God. I know God died for me on the cross and for my sins. But that's really like one of the few times that I'm on the trail and I'm by myself. I'm verbally talking to God out loud. I'm actually talking out loud to the Lord and thanking him for things that I don't do in my everyday life. So there's something about the trail that just brings a purity to me. It cleanses me, and it just gives me self-awareness of who I am and the changes I need to make as a person in real life. And when I'm away from there, that's all I think about is being on the trail.
Thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Chris R., you stated that hiking gave you a drive to push yourself. Can you expand on that for us?
Yeah. So Chris 1 and myself, we're both over 40 now. And so doing things that I used to do when I was younger, pushing myself, whether it's at the gym working out or doing other physical activities, I find, as you get older, you get hurt a little bit more often. And I've had my fair share of injuries.
I can relate to that.
And they linger around. And not to say that backpacking is easy, because it's not, because you put yourself through it. But I simplify it. I'm just walking. I put my pack on and I'm walking from point A to point B. And I like being tested that way physically still. So I'm still achieving something. And obviously in these hikes, we really put on some miles. We've done some 16, 17, even almost a 20-mile day before. And it's very challenging, and I like that. And then the other aspect is the mental aspect, especially on the longer sections that we've done. Him and I being away from our families back home, from our children, and just being disconnected from the outside world. That in itself is a challenge when you're gone for that long. Obviously, living in a society where we're emailing and we're texting all day, and we're having this contact with our friends, our family, and our coworkers, and all of a sudden we kind of cut it off, and it's just the two of us, or the two of us and whatever a couple friends we bring with us. So I like that part of it. I really like just the mental and the physical, how it pushes me to new heights that I don't normally kind of get to experience back home.
Thanks, Chris R. I really appreciate you guys sharing that, and also sharing your journey as you guys make your way north up on the Appalachian Trail. Now we've come to the point in the podcast where the guest or the guest are going to sign off for us by reading their own journal entry, statement, or quote that will inspire us to keep hiking section by section. Chris 1, you can go ahead.
None of your knowledge, your reading, your connections will be any use here. 2 legs suffice, and big eyes to see with. Walk alone across mountains or through forests. You are nobody to the hills or to the thick boughs, heavy with greenery. You are no longer a role or a status, not even an individual, but a body that feels sharp stones on the paths, the caress of long grass and the freshness of the wind. When you walk, the world has neither present nor future, nothing but the cycle of mornings and evenings. Always the same thing to do all day, walk. But the walker who marvels while walking, the blue of the rocks in a July evening light, the silvery green of olive leaves at noon, the violet morning hills, has no past, no plans, and no experience. He has within him an eternal child. While walking, I am but a simple gaze.
Very good. This is Chris 2. I'm going to read a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, and I think this kind of exemplifies why I hike. So, nothing in the world is worth having or worth doing unless it means effort, pain, and difficulty. I have never in my life envied a human being who led an easy life. I have envied a great many people who had led difficult lives and led them well.
Wow, guys. Thank you very much for being on the podcast. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, Julie, thank you so much for having us. And I am going to hit you up on the Smoky section if you want to come with us in May.
No, I'm not kidding. You better not ask me because I'll come. Thanks for being on the show, guys. As you could tell, Chris B and Chris R are not only work family, but hiker family as well. I really look forward to following along with you both as you continue hiking the Appalachian Trail. Next up, we have Let's Talk Gear with Steve. And for this episode, we continue talking about the big three and focus on the tent. All right, guys, welcome back to Let's Talk Gear with Steve. On the last episode, we talked about one of the big three items that is necessary in starting or continuing your backpacking adventures, the backpack itself. Steve gave us some great advice on what to look for in a pack and how to make sure the pack is right for you. This episode of Let's Talk Gear will focus more on the tent. Like backpacks, this is a loaded topic, and from what I can tell, another frequently asked question on the backpacking gear review site. Steve, talk us through how to get started looking for a tent and narrowing down what might be best for what individuals are looking for. Again, maybe top 3 or 4 things that you would recommend on buying a tent. And by the way, welcome back to the show.
Always glad to be here. Thank you so much. And oh my goodness, tents. This is a never-ending subject.
I know, totally loaded. No pressure, Steve. No pressure.
No kidding at all. Okay, well, first of all, let's just pretend like you are absolutely new to all of this, and you really have no clue what is going on. And then let's just say that the last time you slept in a tent was as a child, and mom and dad's monster Coleman tent from Walmart.
Yeah, I think we can all picture that.
Yes, absolutely. When it comes to carrying your life on your back and heading into the backcountry, your tent or your shelter is one of the 2 things that can and will save your life. So a tent is definitely something that you need to put a lot of thought into, and it's not really something that you want to skimp on when it comes to money. With that being said, don't go overboard either.
Right.
One thing that is really confusing, I think, to a lot of folks today is if you see a 2-person tent, let's just use, for example, the Big Agnes Comfort Spur.
And that's a pretty popular one. I see that out there quite a bit.
Probably definitely one of the top 3, if not the most popular tent out there. A Comfort Spur 2-person tent is not technically built for 2 people. It is, but you better really, really like the other person.
Right.
You will be sleeping on top of each other. Now, in the old days, if you bought a 2-person tent, it would fit 2 people with super big, bulky sleeping pads and all of your gear, and you can even put a dog in there with you too.
Right.
Nowadays, a true ultralight 2-person backpacking tent means you will be snuggling. So you definitely better like the person that you are with. The vast majority of us, even if you're going out solo hiking, a lot of solo hikers will use a 2-person tent just for 1 person. A lot of couples will use a 3-person tent or 2 people. And the reason is because we've gotten into this big game, this big contest of what tent manufacturer can make the lightest tent for the best price.
Right.
When you start talking about knocking off weight, the only way to do that really is to get a lighter material, and we can talk about that in just a minute, and then just literally make the tent smaller. A smaller tent weighs less. That's it.
Right.
So they are just going to give you the absolute minimum so they can advertise the absolute lightest weight possible. Yes, we do have 2-person tents that weigh 1.5 pounds now, which is just incredible. But
what I worry about with that, Steve, and
sure.
I kind of find my tent is like, it's my little home at night. It's my protection. It's where I feel safe. And I have an old Hubba tent. It's called a Hubba 1, and I love that thing. I have never, ever gotten wet inside that tent, but I always am looking at different things. Oh, that's a pound lighter. Oh, that's this, that's that. But I worry about that new material with it soaking through and things getting wet. I mean, how can you change my confidence level on that, Steve?
Well, that's actually kind of hard to do with that one particular tent.
Yeah.
That whole series of tent is, I guess a lot of folks would say, it is the perfect mixture. It's not the super, super heavy-duty, heavyweight tents, but it's not the actual ultralight tents to where, a stiff breeze, which I don't want to say that, but
right.
A small branch falls out of a tree in a stiff breeze. It's not going to phase your Hubba tent at all. Whereas on some of these newer models with these super ultralight fabrics, there are going to be a lot of holes. There are going to be a lot of tears. There is going to be a lot of actual maintenance to keep your tent healthy as you use it more and more often. Lighter means less durable, always.
Yeah. I mean, with my hub, I can literally ball it up and throw it and go get it and bring it back, and there's nothing wrong. Another thing I've noticed, because I've seen a lot of the new ultralight tents out there, you really have to carry a lot of tent stakes. Like the hubba sets up with 2, and it's freestanding. That's another thing we can talk about.
Yes.
But I see people out on the trail, it takes them forever to set up the tent. It's almost like I'd rather have a different tent that takes me 2-3 minutes to set up, because at the end of the day I'm exhausted, versus the lighter weight tent. Yes, I might be able to go more miles, but the setup, can you talk about the setup in the different tents for just a second?
Sure, absolutely. There's 3 different categories when it comes to tents. You have your totally freestanding tents, which is what a lot of us think about when we think of mom and dad's old, Coleman tent. The poles go in and the tent body attaches to it, and the whole thing stands up on its own. At that point, you're just kind of staking it down so the wind doesn't really blow it over. Now we have what are called semi-freestanding tents, meaning that that same pole structure will hold up most of the tent, but you still need a few stakes to kind of finish it off. And the reason for this is less poles on your tent means less weight, and less weight is a better selling aspect for the tent manufacturer. The far end of that is what we call trekking pole shelters. And a lot of these don't have any poles at all. You actually use your trekking poles to hold your tent up. Once you start dealing with trekking pole tents, then you're dealing with 8, 10, 12, 16 stakes to have this thing tied out all over the place.
Right.
Now, they all have goods and they all have bads about them. The one nice thing about the trekking pole shelters is they're obviously light. You're saving a pound or 2 because you're not carrying an actual set of poles with you. But I do a lot of camping and a lot of hiking above tree line, above 10,000 feet, where it's all rocks. I just can't pound in 10 or 12 stakes.
Right. And then if you're,
that is completely 100% freestanding.
Right. The freestanding, you just pick up and move it and go somewhere else. That's correct. One of the reasons probably that I haven't gone with a different tent is because I don't want to stake out 12 or 13 different stakes. I want to be able to slam my tent up, get in, and go to sleep. But I mean, I guess you have to weigh the pros and cons. What is your objective when you're out hiking, that kind of thing?
Yep, definitely. And then again, a lot of it has to do with weather too. If it's going to be raining, a lot of folks, like you said, you don't want to spend 20, 30 minutes pounding in all these different stakes. And with every stake, you have guy lines. And with guy lines, you have to get the right tension to get the right pitch. And before you know it, you're just drenched, soaking wet, trying to get your shelter set up. Whereas if you have a completely freestanding model, you can set most of these up in like 2 minutes or less. Be in it, you can be done. You can be cooking dinner. You can be finished with dinner. Have your air pad blown up and be ready to take a nap before your neighbor is done driving in his 16 stakes.
Right. And I've actually hiked with people that have that. And I kind of like just hurry up and get all mine done. And I'm sitting in there and I'm like, are y'all not eating dinner yet? Or what's going on?
Exactly. But again, to each his own.
Right.
Some folks like that, like to have that extra weight savings. And then again, like I said, it does have a lot to do with the weather. If you're going to be hiking in windier conditions, if you're going to be hiking in wetter conditions, you might not want to go with the full trekking pole shelter. And I mean, with that being said, there are some amazing trekking pole shelters out there. They are just a lot more work to go involved with actually setting them up, with taking care of them, taking them down, as opposed to just your quick traditional 2-pole hub system. Wham, bam, you're done. Let's go to bed.
And I worry about my trekking pole too. If I'm out there and my trekking pole snaps, then I'm out looking for sticks and tree limbs and
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's actually another big negative for me personally, because a lot of the hiking that I do is I will hike into the base of a mountain, like an actual 12,000 foot mountain peak, and I will set up a base camp for the night. And then I will take off from there the next morning to go summit the mountain and then come back down. Well, if I need to take my trekking poles with me, what am I going to do with my tent?
What are you going to do? Yeah, that's true too. Like
I don't want to pack that up and take it with me, because that's just dead weight going up and down the mountain. And I can't really just pull my trekking poles out and let it flap in the wind all day long. So I find myself bowling it up bagging it up and hiding it behind a tree or something.
Right.
As opposed to being able to just leave my shelter completely as is if it were an actual freestanding shelter with a complete pole hub system.
Right. Well, it sounds like we've completely talked people out of getting a ultralight tent, but not really. That's not the case. We're out just to tell people the truth, right? That's what we want people to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, honestly, as there are tons of people who truly, truly love trekking pole shelters. And I mean, I do too. I do. I'm a few of them myself. I honestly, I'm like 30 different shelters. So.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, it's personal preference. It's where you're going, what you're doing, how you're hiking, all that good stuff. So. Yeah,
absolutely. And there's a whole nother aspect of the shelter thing that we haven't even touched on, which would be hammocks. And we could spend another day talking about that part of it too. So
yeah, hammocks, and then there's the whole set up your own tarp ground cloth deal. So
cowboy camping,
cowboy camping. So so we'll have to actually add that to another episode. Once again, Steve, thanks for chatting with us. And listeners, please go check out Steve's pages on Facebook. They're also going to be listed in the show notes. We would love to have Steve answer some of your gear questions on the podcast. So if you have questions, please send them to me via email at jesternc2212@gmail.com. Thanks again, Steve, and we'll talk on the next one.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning light. I wonder if you'd wander with me, and I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods. You're wondering if I go wandering with you, what kind of trouble we'll get ourselves into. Would it be wrong to tag along with a band of vagabonds? You wonder if I'd wander with you. So I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river. I'm wondering if you'd come wandering my way, if you ever get lost or if the trail leads you astray. The music of the pack can always bring you back. I wonder, can we wander away? And I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
For the ones who work hard to ensure their crew can always go the extra mile, and the ones who get in early so everyone can go home on time, there's Grainger, offering professional-grade supplies backed by product experts so you can quickly and easily find what you need. Plus, you can count on access to a committed team ready to go the extra mile for you. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.